Hello and welcome to this necessary and collaborative discussion around a supportive ecosystem for women-led businesses. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land from which SBE resides, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event today. In the spirit of reconciliation, SBE, EY and Heads Over Heels acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. My name is Kim McGuinness from SBE Australia, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. For some housekeeping before I kick over to Nicole Cook, our CEO, please mute yourself unless you're speaking. Please leave your camera on, as it gives a much warmer environment than a sea of corporate headshots. Please post any questions you may have in the chat. We will get to them throughout the conversation. I'll be monitoring the chat, so if there's anything direct, you're welcome to send me a direct message, or we'll get to them at the end. If you want to speak to our panel during Q&A, that is absolutely possible, so I ask that you use the raise your hand option in Zoom, and we'll unmute you at the appropriate time. So as we go through the discussion today, think about who you know that would benefit, whether it's yourself or someone else, and refer them to the relevant person. Elevating women-led business is good for both economy and community, and it's up to us to support them. With that, I will hand you over to SBE Australia's CEO, Nicole Cook, who, as well as being a phenomenal businesswoman herself, will be your moderator for this exciting and necessary discussion. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome, everyone. I couldn't be more excited about this conversation. We are very thankful to be co-hosting it today with Heads Over Heels and EY. All three organizations have worked to support and continue to work to support the advancement of women-led businesses having huge impact. And you'll hear a little bit more about each program as we go through. Many of you would know that the technology sector in Australia continues to advance, being the third largest contributor to GDP growth at $167 billion contribution. Over the past 10 years, 67 businesses have been created that are worth over $100 million, demonstrating the importance of investment in early stage businesses in an inclusive way. With that, I'd like to introduce Sarah Curtis-Valley, our head of early stage programs at SBE, to present her research on how men and women navigate the entrepreneurial ecosystem in different ways. And I look forward to the discussion that we'll have after Sarah's presentation. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So entrepreneurship is vital to all economies because successful businesses drive job creation and opportunities. Australia is seeking to grow its GDP, create jobs, and secure its economic future by supporting and encouraging entrepreneurship and venture creation. But women are not engaging in this in equal numbers to men. Slide, please. The Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, known as GEM, tracks engagement in entrepreneurial activity in hundreds of countries around the world. In Australia, GEM found that early stage engagement in entrepreneurial activity was much lower for women than it was for men. So 15.3% of men in Australia are engaged in some form of entrepreneurial activity, while it's less than 10% for women. In South Australia, where I live, the gap is even wider, where only 5.6% of women are engaged in venture creation. We know that people and their talents are the core drivers of sustainable long-term economic growth. And it is people who drive innovation in order to address the most pressing challenges of our time. If we are not fully engaging half of our population in entrepreneurship, we are failing to leverage some of our most valuable human assets. We are also leaving money on the table. A study by the Boston Consulting Group in partnership with the Sherry Blair Foundation calculated that if Australia can reach parity in the number of female and male entrepreneurs, the boost to GDP could be worth up to $135 billion annually. There are countless reports and reams of data that tell the story of this problem. Startup Muster, a comprehensive survey of the Australian ecosystem, reported that in 2018, only 22.3% of startup founders were female, and that the percentage of women founders had actually declined over the previous year. In South Australia, the 2020 Startup Report looked at 308 startups with high growth potential that had been founded in South Australia over the past 10 years. Of these, only 19% were founded by women. A very well-researched report that was recently released by TechBoard shows a strong upward trend in overall funding raised by Australian startups, which is fantastic. However, you can see that the proportion of funds raised by solely female teams, in yellow, is a drop in the bucket compared to that of the male teams. In fact, for the 4-year period of this report, from July 2017 to June 2021, TechBoard identified about 3,500 funding events involving 2,100 companies. Only 4% of the total funds raised were by solely female-funded companies. But while we often tend to focus on the gender investment gap, I believe this is a symptom of a whole range of issues that occur much earlier in the funnel. For my research, which I undertook as an MBA student at the University of Adelaide, I wanted to understand how nascent entrepreneurs navigate the ecosystem and how this experience differs for men and women. For those unfamiliar with the concept of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, it can be understood as a set of elements, including culture, capital markets, and customers that combine in complex ways to create the fertile ground for new businesses to launch and to scale. My research investigated how men and women founders navigate and experience the entrepreneurial ecosystem of South Australia. My data collection included in-depth interviews with a range of prominent actors, as I called them, in the ecosystem, interviews with 22 founders of high growth potential ventures, and a gender equality audit of 2 accelerator programs. Today, I'm going to focus on some of the themes which emerged from my interviews with the founders. So, cognitive psychology posits that identity formation is characterized by the explicit and tacit negotiation of push and pull factors, where individuals who are located in a particular sociocultural context may be pulled toward a particular identity because of positive experiences or reinforcements, or may be pushed away from the identity due to negative experiences or societal messages. The identities that we embrace and integrate are critical because they give meaning to fundamental questions of who we are and what we do. For early stage founders, entrepreneurial identity creates a sense of legitimacy, and it mediates the relationship with other actors in the ecosystem. In turn, this influences how founders act and behave when setting up their firms and what choices they believe are available to them. Research on the development of entrepreneurial identity has found that people can be pulled into entrepreneurship via positive encouragement from significant authority figures, including professors, role models, and mentors. And this, combined with a well-developed social and professional network, can encourage and support this emergence of an entrepreneurial identity. My research highlighted that the journey of early stage male entrepreneurs is marked by these strong pull factors, which has the effect of continually reinforcing their decision to pursue their business venture. In contrast, the female founders in my study experienced a lack of these pull factors, as well as more negative reinforcements and barriers. All of the women in my sample talked to me about facing both sexism and subtle but pervasive incidents of gender discrimination in the context of founding and building their businesses. So these experiences may explain in part why so many studies, including my own, have found that women entrepreneurs can struggle to embrace an entrepreneurial identity. In addition to fewer women self-identifying as entrepreneurs, it has been well documented that female founders have lower average levels of optimism and self-confidence and a higher fear of failure compared to male entrepreneurs. Paradoxically, it's also been found that women are more likely than men to fear success. Research shows that male entrepreneurs rate their future prospects for business growth higher than female business owners, and that women are more concerned about the risks involved and tend to express a desire for a slower rate of growth. Put together, these findings highlight that female entrepreneurs often struggle to embrace that entrepreneurial identity. Entrepreneurship is more about who one thinks they are than about the economic behavior they undertake. The process of entrepreneurial identity development is a personal and social emergence and can help explain why some individuals choose and then continue to engage in entrepreneurial activity and why others do not. The process of identity formation is deeply connected to entrenched social norms, including the performance of gender. Men are generally more confident in their own abilities than women and show a stronger bias towards overconfidence. This effect has been demonstrated for many different tasks across many different research studies, but it appears to be strongest for pursuits that are assumed to be primarily in the masculine domain, including for business and entrepreneurship. In addition to entrepreneurial identity, one of the themes that strongly emerged from my founder interviews was the critical importance of social capital. Professional and social networks have been shown to provide entrepreneurs with the resources, opportunities, information, labor, skills, and contacts needed to build successful ventures. Social capital theory rests on the premise that in addition to purely financially driven relationships, important socially driven dimensions need to be taken into account when it comes to venture creation. Cultivating social capital and networks is especially important for startups because these connections mediate the acquisition of resources and the exploitation of opportunities. It's been argued that social capital is of particular importance in highly competitive, rapidly evolving industries, where founders need to constantly leverage resources and information obtained in order to survive and grow. As one of the venture capitalists I interviewed said, it's today's incidental introduction which can lead to tomorrow's unicorn. The question I would pose is who is introducing who and who's getting sidelined in these conversations. Many studies have uncovered that social networks and networking are produced through gendered practices, which in turn lead to gendered social capital. Fundamentally, access to entrepreneurial networks may be one of the crucial barriers for female founders. Many scholars of female entrepreneurships have noticed that the sociocultural status of women, gendered education and professional networks, and stereotypes about women can negatively impact how women entrepreneurs acquire resources and information. One example of this from my research is that all of the male founders I interviewed were members of at least one organization, such as EO or YPO, while none of the women founders in the sample were members of these organizations. And while of course organizations like these are open to women, the degree of male dominance in the organizations themselves can become a self-perpetuating process, whereby female entrepreneurs report not being aware of the existence of these groups, not being referred to or invited into them through their networks, and not feeling as comfortable applying or showing up, even when they're highly qualified to do so. Further, the male entrepreneurs in my sample talked about regularly attending both informal and formal networking events, and said these were really valuable ways to build their professional networks and strategic contacts. The women founders I interviewed talked about being intimidated to attend events, not being able to do so because of parenting responsibilities, and sometimes feeling excluded or marginalized when they did attend events that were overwhelmingly male. In summary, the comparative lack of social capital can end up marginalizing women founders from really important information, influence, and solidarity benefits, which fuel entrepreneurial activity. This issue has been repeatedly identified by scholars of entrepreneurship, and my findings were certainly in line with this. Compared to the male founders in my sample, the women had much less robust networks, were much less likely to have a mentor, and did not always feel confident or empowered to leverage their contacts to support their business growth. So let's get on to the solutions side of things. How do we amplify opportunity for all nascent entrepreneurs? What are the best ways to make our ecosystems inclusive, supportive, and accessible? Research by the Boston Consulting Group has shown that entrepreneurial role models have an amplified benefit for girls and women and are really helpful in encouraging, inspiring, and building confidence in aspiring female business owners. Historically, the lack of visible women role models in Australia could very well have had a dampening effect on the aspirations of potential women entrepreneurs. Historically, the template for being an entrepreneur has been intrinsically masculine. One example of this from just recently is an August 2021 article in the Fin Review titled 7 Business Legends Who Shaped Australia. And yes, all 7 were men. As part of my research, I conducted an audit of all public-facing marketing and comms materials for some of the top programs, organizations, and government entities involved in the South Australian startup world. And the images that I found were overwhelmingly men. In order to challenge these deeply ingrained norms, we need to actively promote and elevate women entrepreneurs. Globally, research has found that accelerator programs give startups a range of really important advantages. There's ample data showing that early stage companies that take part in accelerators have a higher survival rate, allow companies to raise significantly more capital, to attract that investment faster, and to have a better chance of a successful exit by acquisition. Of course, these programs also offer really valuable networking opportunities with other important people in the ecosystem. There's increasing awareness that accelerators can have an important role to play in leveling the playing field for women entrepreneurs, in that these programs give women increased access to networks, funding, and other resources that might otherwise be unattainable. However, most accelerator programs, both in Australia and globally, don't publish statistics regarding the gender of the founders in their programs. However, most anecdotal evidence has shown that these accelerator programs remain overwhelmingly represented by men. I did some data collection of some of the top 3 accelerator programs here in South Australia. And over the last few years, women represented less than 30% of the founders in these programs. I would argue that all Australian accelerators, particularly those receiving public funding, need to adopt a proactive strategy to actively recruit early stage women entrepreneurs to move towards gender parity in these programs. Another of the striking findings in my research is that while almost all the male founders had at least one mentoring relationship that they assessed as critically important in the success of their venture, the majority of the women in my sample did not have a mentor. A notable theme that emerged from my founder interviews was that most of the men had been introduced or connected to their mentor through their networks. Social capital in action. These were robust, highly valued relationships. The male founders described how some of their mentors ended up chairing their board of directors or becoming investors or introducing them to key customers. The women in my sample told me that they really struggled to find a mentor relationship that they found valuable. And they were not connected or introduced to mentors in the same way that the male founders have been. Recent research by the World Economic Forum has highlighted that connections to mentors is a critical component of new venture success. So we need to think about how to facilitate these relationships for all founders. A gender-aware analysis of entrepreneurship and the ecosystem in which it happens needs to acknowledge that currently men and women differ in their ability to access, build, and leverage networks. Social capital theory shows us that gender inequality can then lead to an unequal distribution of resources, where gatekeepers and power brokers can impact women's ability to access these really important resources. So from this perspective, the relative lack of social capital isn't the fault or failing of individual women, but part of a larger system framed by inequalities of power. So I would invite all of us to acknowledge and surface these issues, and then collectively and individually choose to create a new framework based on inclusivity and connection. So to sum up, just like a good investment, entrepreneurial identity and social capital compound. And if we can work to create the conditions that allow more people, men and women, to embrace and integrate an entrepreneurial mindset, we will see more venture creation and more innovation. And if we can all see our social capital as a tool that can be used for good, we can leverage our networks to connect early stage founders to the information, the advice, and the encouragement they need to stay the course. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. I look forward to exploring a little bit more about the social capital and entrepreneurial identity through our panel. It's fantastic research that we're thrilled to be able to share. And while your work was done in South Australia, it can certainly be extracted to Australia and I know beyond the borders. So just in that regard, I just thought I would give each partner an opportunity to give an overview of the programs that they have to support women entrepreneurs leading, as we like to say, leading big businesses and doing the big things. And so we'll start with SBE and then Heads Over Heels and EY. And I have the pleasure of co-hosting the event with two very strong women who have supported SBE for a long time. We have Heads Over Heels, Nicola Swift, who I actually have known, through various networks since my role with Jobs for New South Wales. And as Jobs for New South Wales, whilst I didn't have an opportunity to engage with Heads Over Heels, I knew of it, and particularly as I was leaving the organization to do other things. So welcome, Nicola, and I look forward to hearing more about the Heads Over Heels program. And then we have Malia Forna from Ernst & Young, a partner and in both the government incentives practice and a leader of EY Private, Oceania Startups, and entrepreneurship leader. So Malia has been involved with SBE for a very long time as a mentor, an advisor, and a sponsor over the years. And the best thing about all three programs is that the entrepreneurs that we have here today have gone through all three. And sometimes it has an order, and sometimes it doesn't have an order, and sometimes it's referred one way, sometimes it's referred the other way. But the main thing is that we're all aligned in mission and in purpose for what we're trying to do. SBE, so about SBE, we started 10 years ago. And when you hear that stat that I said earlier about 67 new businesses worth over 100 million being created 10 years ago, I think we timed it right. Coming from the US off the back of what the US had done 10 years prior about helping women lead businesses that are transforming industries. SBE has delivered our flagship tech program and life sciences program in partnership with Springboard Enterprises to be our global programs. And after that, we also have a much, much earlier stage with Evolve and Explore. So Explore being the ideation stage and Evolve being between MVP, commercialize, and going global. We deliver maybe 13 programs a year, but spend a lot of time on our later stage programs around the tech and life sciences, of which we've just opened up our SBE Global Tech Expressions of Interest. So with that, I'll hand over to Nicola to give a little bit of an overview of your programs and where Heads Over Heels fits in terms of the entrepreneurial journey.
Great, Nicole, thank you very much. And it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you and Malia today and to do this joint event and to stand together in this ecosystem. So thank you for having Heads Over Heels as a co-host today. And for those of you who don't know Heads Over Heels, we occupy a unique niche really within the female founder support ecosystem, as we believe for various structural reasons, which Sarah outlined rather well earlier, that female founders lack the connections required to scale that their male counterparts more naturally enjoy. And it is providing those connections that is the piece of the puzzle that Heads Over Heels specifically tries to solve for as we seek to increase the representation of women leading high growth businesses. So to do that, we carefully select 8 to 10 outstanding female founders every year. Female founders like the ones we're going to come on and introduce you to, Lauren Hall, Charlotte Petrus, and Monique Brewster, who are all building and leading high growth potential companies. And we put these female founders in front of a very senior audience of both businessmen and women. And crucially, it is an audience of both men and women. And we ask, and the female founders ask this senior audience for the connections they require to grow and scale their businesses. Our portfolio companies can return again and again, and we encourage them to continually engage with the strategic network that Heads Over Heels offers. For our connectors, we make it very easy and very time efficient to have an enormous impact. And for our portfolio companies, the connections gained, whether they be to revenue generating clients or to advice and expertise or maybe early stage investment capital, can be absolutely game changing. The other unique aspect about Heads Over Heels is that we offer a free service to our female founders. And we can really only do this because of the incredible and long-running generosity of our platinum partners. These are our corporate sponsors. And as I hand over to Malia at EY, I'm very proud to say that EY is in fact our longest running corporate sponsor. Over to you, Malia.
Thank you, and Nicola and everyone else. So on behalf of EY, I'm thrilled to be hosting this interesting conversation with SBE and a Heads Over Heels. Look, as you've both mentioned, EY has a long history of supporting entrepreneurs globally, including with both of these fabulous organisations. which is drawing on our experience and industry capabilities and our EY drivers, 7 drivers of growth framework to support entrepreneurial and high growth companies. Everyone is part of this conversation recognises the importance of entrepreneurs as creating social and economic value and driving innovation and bringing new concepts and products to market. And so, we support entrepreneurs at many stages of development, and that's both through our own programs that I'll talk to, but also supporting the initiatives of others like this, including Springboard Enterprises and Heads Over Heels, but also through the regulators and policymakers, also up through our education institutions, various accelerators, both in Australia and New Zealand, but right across the globe, and really importantly for us, also industry associations. So this year, we're excited to be celebrating 21 years of EY's Entrepreneur of the Year program in Australia. So actually starting this month, we will be sharing some inspiring stories of past and current entrepreneurs and their impact when we launched the 2021 program. So it's the first and only truly global award of its kind. And this EY program celebrates those who are building and leading successful, growing and highly dynamic businesses. Just to show the breadth of that program, winners from more than 140 city-based awards in more than 50 countries actually compete for the title of EY World Entrepreneur of the Year. In Australia specifically, since 2001, we've celebrated more than 1,500 entrepreneurs through the EY Entrepreneur of the Year program. But in addition to that, we also specifically have a strong focus on supporting female entrepreneurship. And this includes our global EY Entrepreneur Winning Women program, which is now in its 12th year. And this is an evergreen executive leadership program that's designed for women with established business who are ready to scale their operations and grow to become market leaders. And we help them do that. So at the same time, this program creates a vibrant global community. We've already talked about how important that community is of successful women entrepreneurs and inspiring peer role models, which is one of the aspects that Sarah spoke to earlier on that is needed. And the women involved in that program now number more than 750, and that's across 48 countries. And clearly studies show how these close connections among women entrepreneurs is an absolute key factor to their long-term success. And as mentioned, 2 of our panelists are coming up, Lauren and Renice, are actually part of this particular program. And in 2021, we welcomed 14 more women entrepreneurs across Asia Pacific to join the program. So look, it's a topic close to my heart and I'm personally passionate about. So look, excited to kick on with the panel. So Nicole, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I'm going to jump straight into our panel. We've got, an amazing lineup. One of our fabulous women has to leave us a little bit early, so I'm going to go straight into it. Kim, can you just bring up the introductions for us? Okay, so we have Renice Brewster, who is the co-founder and CEO of Visual Domain. She did SBU's program in 2015, EY's program in 2016, and the Head Over Heels program in 2019. That's Charlotte. Sorry, Renice did it 2017 SBE, 2017 Head Over Heels, and 2019 EY. We were doing the dates just before the meeting so that we could actually get it aligned and see how everyone did. So welcome, Renice. Just quickly, some success from her. They recently announced that News Corp took a major stake in Visual Domain. So congratulations to you, Renice, and your team. We're thrilled to share that news. Next, we have Lauren Hall she's the CEO of Ivy. And Lauren did the SBE program in 2014, the Head Over Heels in 2013, and EY's program in 2016. And I know Lauren is building to a great milestone for her business as well that I'll let her share rather than me. And then we have Charlotte Petrus, the founder and CEO of Timelio. She did the program in 2015, SBE's program, the global tech program, 2016 EY, and 2019 Heads Over Heels. So welcome to the three of you. And joining them, we have Jim Cassidy, who is actually a board director of SBE and the founder of Little Fish to Big Fish. Jim has spent many, many years advancing, emerging businesses and spends a lot of time supporting women-led founders or businesses. And lastly, we have Ian Gardner, who's the co-founder of Innovation Bay, an investment partner of Delex Ventures. Many of you will know Ian from around the ecosystem, and we are thrilled to have him part of the panel. So I'm going to go straight into it so we can make sure that we get Lauren's time and her valuable time and her valuable input, being the powerhouse woman that you are. So Lauren, I'm going to start with you and just going on this idea of social capital and the entrepreneurial identity. You yourself are a serial entrepreneur, having created 5 businesses. And with that, what is it about your identity that you associate being an entrepreneur? What underpins that success? The social capital that you have, what you've built over the years. Just why don't you share a little bit of your insights, being the dynamo that you have become in all of your businesses?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. I hope you can hear me. Can you all hear me all right? Okay, fantastic. It's a real pleasure to participate and especially participate with such an amazing panel. Look, I suppose with any journey of an entrepreneur, it starts.
Oh no.
To achieve. It's also driven quite significantly by the passion and the belief of making a difference in that journey. I think where I've covered everything from product development to tech to pharma, each one had a goal to really solve a fundamental problem. I think that with all 4 companies prior to Ivy, my tech company, all of them were driven particularly bootstrapped by me. It was leveraging personal networks, having existing relationships, and then building up, plans to drive the value of those companies over time. But it's not without its challenges or difficulties, because I think with any founder, you have got to do so much more. It takes huge amounts of courage, firstly, to believe in yourself and then to bring others along that journey with you. Secondly, you have to have access to different forms of capital along that way, whether it's friends and family, people that believe in you, but you really truly have to believe in yourself first to bring people along that journey, because you got to know what your product is doing or solution, what problems it's solving, how you can commercialize that opportunity, and then how do you drive and scale that growth to really be, delivering that change that you want to deliver in the world. When it comes down to Ivy being my tech company, which I first started in South Africa, bootstrapped that for a couple of million, putting everything into it, then actually went to the government to drive some of that additional grant funding to help me deliver global scale. After winning 10 million from the government, it was a huge milestone for me because I had so many barriers against me, particularly being in a black country, which is where we were with the Black Empowerment Act, and to be able to actually show that what I believed I could actually deliver in changing the industry was beneficial for that country. So these are just components of a person's journey that you have proof points along the way. Regardless of the fact that you can sell the product, you've got to commercialize it, how do you fund it? There are different mechanisms to do that. I obviously chose Australia to over the cash and headed into Australia. Again, starting again with no network, no funding, just my IP, and to re-engineer it again, which is why I think the groups like Head Over Heels, EY, Summit Club, SBE are absolutely fundamental to the success of an individual's journey, particularly in the starting process as they step through the creation of their product or solution to market. When I think about the social networks, I had none of it, and they became almost the backbone of my success to be able to step through that next phase of journey. Regardless, I think with any founder, you have to have a will to never give up. It is one of the things around perseverance and resilience that are critical to your success, having confidence and making sure that people can see that you are never going to give up on what you want to achieve. And that comes with a lot of support from networks, people that you meet, leveraging step-by-step new customers to come on board, and then leveraging that to open the next door so that you can run fast. I think that realistically, when I look at 30 years of building companies, what is the core thing that I can say, what is critical to my success? And that was belief that I was going to change the world fundamentally of every product and solution I built. I wasn't ever going to give up because failure was not an option. And I believe that standing proud, having courage, confidence, and accessing capital to deliver that was fundamental to my success. We're now moving, obviously, to the next phase of growth, which is, I've raised 20 million for Ivy over the last 12 years, including a pre-IPO round of 7.5 million. We look to list on the stock market in April 2022. I look at my journey as a woman leading to potentially be the 6th woman to list on the stock market. It's not about me, this journey. This is about being a role model for all other women that don't have voices, that need somebody to look towards, that this is truly possible, and dreams that you have are possible. So that's just a little bit of a light of my journey, and I think that there's so many amazing opportunities that if we stick together and we help change some of those biases, particularly where I believe women have to be funded, women need to be proved that they are backable, and we need more evidence to show success to help change the way people see women today. Because if we don't, and we don't lead by example, things will be very, very slow to change. And if I think back to some of EY's stats, that it will take over 200 years to change that support for women if we don't start making changes today. So I appreciate being part of this today. I will do my best to help be part of that catalyst of change. And if I can extend my time and my learnings to any other woman along this journey, I would be happy to share that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lauren. That was just absolutely brilliant. And I think sharing your journey, and one of the words when we spoke earlier this week that you used that resonated and stays with me is courage. And I think that entrepreneurial identity around how powerful is that, is the belief I was going to change the world, stayed with you. I mean, what courage that is in your social identity, your entrepreneurial identity, to be able to set an example for everyone else. I just think that's absolutely fabulous. And I know I'm conscious that you have to leave us soon, and we thank you for that contribution, and we are so happy to have had you part of this discussion, even if it's just for a short time. So
thank you for having me. You have an amazing panel. I'm terribly sorry to have to dash. Got some very enormous commitments at the moment, but really I think that what's really important about all of this is collaboration, sharing, opening doors, and helping make a difference for everybody. It's not about ourselves. We are examples and catalysts for change. And if we can focus on all of that together, the impact we can make is so enormous. And I look forward to helping being part of that. So thank you so much. Enjoy, all of you, and look forward to the next one with all of you. Take care.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, we thank Lauren for that. She did have an emergency come up, and any great committed entrepreneur, she wanted to make sure that she was still part of the conversation, even though it was only for a short time. On Lauren's words of courage, I'd like to kind of throw it to Jim Cassidy, who picked up on that in our discussion the last time as well. Jim, you've invested a lot of time in advancing emerging businesses led by both men and women. What are some of the themes that resonate most with you in terms of social capital and the entrepreneurial identity? And I would also encourage the panelists to jump in a discussion afterwards.
I think when you look at courage and grit and belief, Lauren to me is absolutely the perfect example of that, coming from a very troubled country and eventually coming into Australia with nothing. And I know that earlier in the week we talked about this whole risk issue, that obviously running a business, any successful business, no matter what gender or diverse background you come from, it's to be successful. And I think there's too many expectations, unfortunately, of women that they've got to prove that they're prepared to take the risk. And that really concerns me greatly. And from a social and cultural aspect, I wonder if we just don't see women-led businesses at very early stages very often. Because it's sort of interesting, because you see them, that they'll get to a certain stage, then they decide this is the type of help I need. And it's then that at that point in time they come into SBE, the Head Over Heels or the EY program. But very early on, we don't really see them, and you wonder why that is the case. Is that because they haven't really found the people that they can trust? Is that because they haven't really found the network that they can rely on? And I think that that's what we've got to change. I mean, I wonder as well if how many women know enough men that they could trust to actually rely on to help them. And I wonder how many men are comfortable actually helping women. Because is it really a natural thing to do? Because when you actually work with the women that I work with, I've worked with some of the highest risk takers. I look at the SBE program, we look at our biotech group. I mean, those women in the space of 2 or 3 years are raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And the risk profile there is absolutely gigantic. And then you look at people like Renice, who I've known for a number of years, and you look at Charlotte, and the way that they have sort of doggedly built their businesses with all the sort of challenges that they face. But again, they've built this fantastic support networks that can work with them. So I agree with what Lauren said earlier. Role models are critical. And if you look at the young kids coming through doing STEM and everything else, there are just insufficient role models for people to actually match to. All the successful women-led businesses I know have got super strong mentors. And those mentors go above and beyond in terms of the work that they do and the introductions that they create and the sort of secrets that they can reveal. And I also think as well that for business, qualified introductions, there is nothing better that drives to faster levels of success than having someone who's trusted to say, this is technology that I believe is very interesting, maybe risky to you at this early stage, but you should see this founder. I also think as well that if you think about it from a male perspective, very often everything is incredibly competitive. And I wonder if that assertiveness in women, not necessarily to be that uber conservative, I've got to win every single game and score every single goal, but just that ability to be really strong in terms of what they want to achieve. I can honestly say that of the top 5 entrepreneurs that I admire more than anyone as people and anyone as success, 4 of them happen to be women because they're successful in everything that they do. They've built the business from the ground up. They're changing the world, and they believe they're changing the world, and they believe they're changing the world to better everyone. But they have worked role models, support groups, mentorship, and introductions. They have worked them so hard. In fact, they're constantly on the phone saying, can you get me in front of this person, please? And again, as I say, I think to everyone who's male today, who's on the audience, it's time to step up and offer help. Because every time I go to an SBE meeting, you could count the amount of people supporting SBE who are male on one hand. And I'd like to be counting it on 4 hands at least. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, Jim. I mean, I was just reflecting on going through the SBE Life Sciences program for the first time and also preparing for some of the future of SBE. One of those programs has over 200 advisors involved for 10 entrepreneurs. That's pretty substantial during a period of time, over 200 mentors and advisors, of which there is a relative great presence of men involved. And those that are there, the impact is is significant. And I think, again, it's about supporting structures, I think. Does anyone else want to comment on that in some of the things that Jim has highlighted there around taking risks, role models, support, mentorship, those key concepts on the panel?
I can probably talk to the taking risk is definitely resonating. When I started Visual Domain with my business partner, it was really, obviously, as all businesses start, it was just an idea, but an idea I couldn't get out of my head. And there was a passion there. It was what I was born to do and wanted to do. But when I look back and reflect now, I think there was maybe a bit of stupidity involved, because it was the GFC. It was 2008. Had never run a business before. Visual Domain is a video production company. We work with brands as their partner in production. And back then, video marketing was not a thing. My husband was in his second year of a carpentry apprenticeship, so the income really did lay with me to kind of bring in, and the mortgage had to be paid. I had a toddler and I was pregnant. So I feel like the risk appetite to start a business in that environment was well and truly there. And in many ways, maybe almost manufacturing an environment where failure was not an option was what helped definitely get that grit and determination to get everything off the ground.
That's great. And thinking about your own journey, Bernice, like what made you do that? Like how did you see yourself at that time? And particularly with all those other, I mean, that's pretty courageous with everything else that was going on at that particular time to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this now. I mean, two questions for you. What were you thinking back then? Like, how did you bring that out? And two, what support did you seek along the way between then and now that led you to the successes you're having now?
The passion's what got me going, and it was something that I kind of just had a moment with, got a bit of experience with video marketing, loved it. It was what I was meant to do. I had found myself actually unemployed. GFC, the company I was working for, went into administration, so had to find myself a job. And as I was going to every interview, it just wasn't ticking the box, or I didn't think it would actually support me and my family. And somehow starting a business, working 80 hours a week, made more logical sense of how I could juggle having a toddler, being pregnant, working from my kitchen table, and actually doing something that I was so passionate about and cared about. But something that's, I think, really resonated with me, I didn't do the SBE program until 2017. So about 8 years into my journey. So it was a very long time to maybe not fully have a network, to not have a community around me of business owners and entrepreneurs. It's such a unique journey. Like, my God, is it a roller coaster? And SBE, it gave that to me, and it couldn't have been at a better time, because it challenged me in all the right ways to, I think, look at my business with a new set of eyes, but in a really safe space where I could talk really openly and honestly about things that I didn't know. And turns out there was a whole bunch of people who did know it. And then there was lots of people who didn't know stuff that I knew. So just being able to have those conversations was just such a game changer. And when you don't have them, you almost don't realize what you're missing out on.
Yeah, and you said something that was quite interesting, and I know Nicola mentioned it early, and I'd be interested to hear Malia's opinion on this, but you said you needed to kind of re-engage at different points in time. I mean, one of the questions we have is that, how many times do you need to re-engage? Like, if you're going to do a new business, do you need to re-engage with the network? Do you enjoy re-engaging with that network? It's that whole sense of community and connectedness that was highlighted in Sarah's research. Safe space, community, connection point, how often? And is it continuous on the journey at different milestones of the business? I like to say whether it's 10 million, I'll start a bit earlier. How about 1 million, first million? How about, 2, 10, 20, 50, IPO, exit? Is there a need to re-engage in these communities?
100%. Like, I think at the start, the challenges that hit you at the start, there's so many that are so similar, but so unique to that moment in time. And then you hit the next stage and you need to build the community of people who have been through that kind of those challenges that are so unique at the 5 million mark, the 10 million mark, the 100 employees, all those different stages. And I think, you know, when you're there, like the second I get comfortable is when I know that I got to start looking and I got to search a little bit higher. It's just, how can I make myself, if I'm getting uncomfortable, that's when I need to find the tribe that will rise me to that next platform to keep building.
Yeah, that's excellent. How about any others on the panel around those topics of, you know, and I'll go to Charlotte next, around having to engage in an ecosystem when you're new to an ecosystem, how to connect, how to identify yourself as that entrepreneur coming into a new community and looking for the support that you need. Does anyone else want to comment? And then I can hand over to Charlotte to kind of explore her journey.
Well, I saw that Charlotte's just come off mute, so I was going to let her. Were you going to talk in that point, Charlotte?
Oh, I'm happy to kick off and just talk about, I guess, similar to Lauren, coming to Australia to start a business with not knowing anybody or even, you know, where to go to start setting up a bank account, to building a finance company. I guess, and maybe in contrast to Jim's point, is I did come across SBE even before I launched the business, and that was probably through that determination of arriving to this country and going, well, how do I do this? I just need to talk to as many people who will talk to me as possible, and that is reaching out to potential customers, people who would be customers of the business that I had a vision for, and other people who had built businesses to talk about their experiences. And I also read a lot of books that entrepreneurs had written. I'm just trying to take in as much information as possible and going to different events. So that journey of arriving into the country led me quite quickly, actually, maybe luckily, to SBE through an event where I'd met someone who'd just been through it. And so I applied to the program before launching, and pretty much the program was at the same time as we were just trying to get our first customer. So I was probably fairly early and fairly unique and trying to work it all out fairly quickly. And I think what that brought about is just that attitude of trying to talk to as many people as possible. As it did bring about our first customers, it did bring about a lot of connection, and I guess it's just building on it from there.
Yeah, interesting, because and then I'll hand to Ian. I came. When did you come to Australia to do this? Interesting in the year.
It was the end of 2014.
Okay, so I arrived in
end of 2013.
End of 20. So I arrived in 2005 off the back of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Boston, and I went, where the heck is the ecosystem? There was no association of women, men. It was just on fire. Boston was on fire, as was the US. And I landed here and I had to Google hosted software, and one company came up with a job in 2005. And that's how I ended up in recruitment and HR, one industry I said I would never do, but it was off the bat. So that it's an interesting journey from what 2005's ecosystem was to 2013, 2014 to what it is now, right? In terms of the explosion in Australia. And I just think that you, Charlotte, having come in at that time in finding SBE and Heads Over Heels and EY's program was fortuitous in terms of developing out that, you know, that social connectedness that you needed to support yourself. Would you agree, I guess, with that?
Yeah, so don't get me wrong, I met a lot of dodgy people in speaking to them in hindsight, but I guess, you know, every 10 people you talk to, one's going to be really beneficial and provide a lot of learnings. And what I'm still fascinated by today, and particularly going back 7 years, is how generous people are with their time. And you just need to be asking. And I was just shocked as to how willing people were to help when you actually put yourself out there. You're a little bit vulnerable, and people help. And another like really good examples is actually with EY. And because I'm in the fintech space, they have been over the years running these little lunches, fintech roundtables, really quite small, maybe 10 people. And they had this guest speaker coming along. And sometimes you think, oh, should I go to this? Shouldn't I? And luckily that day I did, which was quite a few years ago, because it's like a sliding doors moment when you do network and go to these events. And the speaker of that day was, you'll probably know him, Malia, Anthony Thompson, who's he's my most favourite person. He's founded 3 banks and more recently 86400 in Australia, which he sold to NAB. And where I really connected with him is just his approach to want to do finance differently, right, which is the whole passion behind what I'm doing. And so I reached out to him afterwards. I'm just like, I love what you're doing. I love your approach to finance, which is so unique. And we got talking, and he ended up, being a shareholder in Timelio. And but not only that, he's made some really important connections that have been game changers for me. And more recently, our announcement around our Goldman Sachs funding, that goes back many, many years ago with just an introduction from Anthony Thompson from a lunch at EY, and it sort of changes the whole trajectory of your journey, just some of these connections that you meet. And to my point around being generous with time, he's now back in the UK, but I know anytime I can call him, just about day or night, and he has time to stop and talk. And it just blows my mind that people are so generous with their time.
That's great. Ian, did you want to say something?
Yeah, look, just quickly, I just wanted to follow on something that Renise said about the power of your peers. Really, the most powerful thing that we, being Innovation Bay in particular, but Gelix, I suppose, as well, have ever done is to bring great people, specifically founders, together. Because the reality is nobody quite understands how hard it is to do a startup unless you're running a startup. So your other half doesn't get it, your staff don't get it, your investors in many cases don't get it. Nobody really gets it. But the problem is, as a founder, you don't have time to go and build relationships where you can get vulnerable and you trust them and you can be confidential and, all the things that sort of, underpin friendships and the ability to share and learn. So the challenge is you really do need to join these groups. I just wanted to reinforce the fact that these groups are the most powerful thing that Innovation Bay has ever done. Lauren mentioned it, and I think, the Heads Over Heels members, we've got, I think, 12 members, 12 women members in Summit, and 8 of them have been through Heads Over Heels. And it just, it's incredibly powerful. They learn from each other, they support each other, they become friends with each other. And it's terrific to see that and to see the learnings they get from it. So I just wanted to reinforce that peer-to-peer is probably the most important thing we can do here.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of topics that, and these are more ad hoc questions that, from the discussion that's happening is a couple of the themes. I don't know about all of you, but sliding doors seems to be coming back as a topic. And I don't know if anybody else has recognized it, but the movie's popping up, the concept's popping up. And I even had my 21-year-old daughter, I forced her to watch it because something had happened in her decision-making life around those sliding doors moments. And I think on the issue of choosing to become part of an event or a community and taking time out from your business to work on your business and make those connections, that does take courage. It does take time. It does take focus. And it takes a decision, right? And so I'm going to throw to the panel and say, all of you are quite impressive and successful in that way. And this would be anybody, Sarah, Jim, Leah, Nicola as well. What are those moments that you remember that would be fun to contribute and share with the group that you would say might be in a business context? I know there's life context, kind of a sliding door moment. For those that have never seen the movie, you have to watch it. It's a bit old, and I am dating myself, but the concept is back. So just see if anyone has a moment they would like to share. It's
I
a
don't
bit
know if
off
it's
the
a
cuff.
sliding door moment, but there was an aha moment. Do you want an aha moment?
Sure. An aha moment.
Well, fortunate Visual Domain, we do get to interview a lot of just really great business leaders. And I was actually on set producing, which I rarely do, but was this day. And it was someone who's led his business for, 40 years. So been in the game a long time. And he said it was only within the last 10 years that he had a moment that his role above all else is to be a leader. And I don't think it had dawned on me until I kind of heard it from him that, oh, that's kind of my role too. And it's uncomfortable. And he was uncomfortable saying it. But I think that's what we've got to get comfortable. It's like we're actually here to be leaders, and it almost just puts everything in context of, okay, we've got this vision of what we want to create. It's our role to kind of lead the people to kind of come towards it and to take ownership of that role. And Sarah sort of, I guess, speaks a bit to, that identity piece of just really leaning in and owning it. And programs like this are full of amazing leaders, and leaders make other leaders. So having them to turn to when you're trying to create leaders within your own organization is just so invaluable. And I think maybe not a sliding door moment, but it was, I think, that kind of turning point for me of just not, feeling uncomfortable with that role of just actually owning the fact that actually, no, I need to step into this because I'm not doing the people a good service within my organization if I don't.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the kind that comment, I think, when we spoke earlier or later last week, and I think it was you or it was Charlotte who had said, I needed to remain conscious about what I'm doing and about the impact that I'm having. So that alone gave you, the courage and the ability to take a risk, is to be focused on the impact that you're actually having by doing what you're doing. And I just thought that was quite a powerful statement, and related to that exactly around the choice to be a leader in, encouraging a lot more women to pursue the support needed. And I also want to reiterate around this, that this isn't about not supporting men or encouraging men. This is around different support structures that we need to do to advance women to have the same numbers. I think Sarah was saying, when you look at the different participation rates and the stats of women entrepreneurs versus male entrepreneurs, we need to get them a little bit closer to even, just like every other stat that the ecosystem puts out there. Does anyone else have, and sliding door moment, what I mean to, for those that have never seen the movie or don't understand, is that it's a decision that you made that fundamentally shifted where you ended up, right? And so whether that was a choice you made to enter one of the 3 programs here, or a choice you made to come to Australia to start your business, or, some of those moments that somewhat shifted everything in terms of, I had the courage to make that decision and to take that risk, and therefore I'm sitting kind of where I'm sitting today.
I had a sliding door moment when I was about 19, and I was sitting in the pub one night, and I'd just come back from the place I worked, which was doing engineering, and I realized that all the people that walked in the bar, whether, she was driving a nice car, he looked like he had a really good suit. And I just thought at that point in time, there's absolutely no money whatsoever in engineering of the type of engineering I'm doing, and I should be doing sales and marketing. And that next day, I did what you did in those days, was I went to the back of the paper and looked at the jobs and saw a job that said, are you an engineer and would you like to get into sales? I applied for that job. Bizarrely enough, it was a very large Dutch company that went from there. So that is my sliding door moment, which is, there is a better life out there always if you just keep looking for it, or it may land on your lap.
Yeah, absolutely. And recognizing them and paying attention to them, when the signs are all surrounding you, I think is the key here. And does anyone else? Sarah, do you look like you look like you're ready to. Sarah herself has sold, started a successful business in in the US and sold it to come back to Australia. So I wanted to make sure she got the recognition for that. I mean, mine was the fact that I was working for PwC right when the internet boom started in Boston, and friends of mine at the tech company I first started with said, what do you think about doing this with us? And I looked around and I said, this is a game changer, the future. Moved back from Washington, DC to Boston to start that first business with friends. We were called the Dirty Dozen. It was a mix of 6 men, 6 women who started this. There was a founder, 2 founders, but the Dirty Dozen, built the business and sold it to GE. And from then on, this has just kind of become part of the language and the opportunity. I'm going to move. Does anyone else have anything they want to comment there? Decisions, game changers, moments we can share about. It's extracting these concepts of taking risk and courage and resilience is that was so much highlighted in the entrepreneurial identity from Sarah's research. So try to extract some of those experiences. And then what I wanted to do is kind of talk to Ian a little bit about the Australian ecosystem around support. I mean, Heads Over Heels, EY, Innovation Bag, you can list all the organizations. It is massive. And there was one time that a friend of mine was exiting a corporate role, very big role, head of GM, vice president. And they said, I want to do this, but I'm afraid to take the risk. Now, this wasn't a male. And I said, you have no idea how big this community is that will support you. And I recommend you do this first, even if you exit it, just to understand how big in Australia this support network is. So the questions I have for you, Ian, being such a key participant in the environment, is how important is that sense of community? What's the support that's available when building a business? And do you feel that it's equally represented, and what can be done better? I mean, I want to extract the issues with it as well as
Sure.
the benefits of it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can definitely speak with experience here. I mean, I landed in Australia. In fact, it's a small world story. Jim and I grew up in the same town in Glasgow. Yeah. I think my mum may have even taught him at school, but we hadn't quite established that. So yeah, I came out here having married Andrea, who's Australian. Many of you will know she is the founder and CEO at Gelix. And that was 2002. And I basically fell into a job running what became a software business. And I mean, I was well connected when I came out of Scotland. I kind of knew who to call and what to do when you needed something. And I had nothing here. So I kind of, saw firsthand just the lack of ecosystem. But, it's funny when you don't know what you don't know, you can't really put your finger on it. So there was no ecosystem and we didn't know what it actually meant. But I did know that I needed to get to meet people. So I ended up founding Innovation Bay because I sort of guess, the founder in me saw the gap in the market. So I did that along with Faden Stow, and we're still running it. I mean, this is almost 20 years later. So kind of the trajectory of the ecosystem has really followed what we were trying to do there. And it goes back to the point I made before. It was all about bringing good people together. And often it was a speaker event. Later, it was a pitch event. In terms of trying to support the ecosystem, I mean, again, we saw firsthand just how male-dominated this sector can be. I remember there was one Innovation Bay event we did. It was a pitch dinner in probably 2011, and we were doing it up in a place called Table for 20 near Taylor Square in Sydney. And it was great. We had a room full of investors, but every single one of the people in that room was male. There wasn't a single female in the room. I think we had one female pitching. And I said, look, we can't have this. I mean, this is it's wrong on multiple levels and we need to support and encourage. And it's not that we went out and announced to everyone, hey, we're going to have 50% female participation here. It wasn't as simple as that. We just called it out and we said, okay, we're going to have a minimum one woman pitching during the night. In terms of the 3 to 5 startups that we had coming through. As soon as we did that, we kind of went from averaging 0 to 1 to averaging 2 to 3. So it really made a massive difference. And also we started getting more women coming along to pitch. who are investors too. So and I I still see it. I mean, I come from venture capital. I mean, the number of female GPs or partners within the venture firms in the investment role, it's still sitting around probably 10%. I think it's getting better. There's a few more coming through. And even more unusual is a woman who's founded a venture business. So you've got Michelle Deaker, probably Andrea now, Sarah Nola at Tenacious, but it's a tiny fraction. And then I also work in the events business with Innovation Bay and the community side. And that is, there's a lot of women. We have 70% of our Innovation Bay team is women. So look, I see it all the time that, to try and address your question a little more, Nicola, but the reality is everyone wants to help. There's no real dickheads in this ecosystem as far as I've come across, and I think that's really important. And I think that is a self-perpetuating thing. So those of us who are early in it, and I think it's also, you can't be a successful startup founder if you're a dickhead, because you're not going to get people to buy your product, invest in you, or work for you. So you kind of end up being naturally quite a decent human. And I think that is reflective in the ecosystem. And I'm really proud of the way that the ecosystem does. And you hear this all the time. I think, Nicole, you made the point, people want to help. They will lean in. If you ask for help and support, you tend to get it. Pay it forward. I mean, I will say that to all of my teams and anyone that I meet, and I'll generally take the meeting. Because if you pay it forward, it's not that you get anything for it necessarily, but one, you feel good, and two, something good could happen for you down the track. So look, that would be my observation of it. There is definitely a huge desire and propensity within this ecosystem to support and help, whether it's male or female. And I think the reality is that the women that we're supporting through all of these programs and Springboard and Heads Over Heels in particular today, they're amazing. I mean, I love coming to those events and doing my bit to support it. I just think it's great. And I do it, whether it was, whoever was involved with it. And it's a really, really important thing that we should be doing.
And Nicole, if I can just jump in there and, really reiterate what Ian is saying here. I mean, I think there is incredible goodwill within this ecosystem and a willingness to help. And I'm sure Charlotte and Renice will nod their head at this, but when I'm talking to our portfolio companies, sort of after a portfolio event in terms of following up the Office of Connections, I'm really always saying, make sure you go back to that senior businessman or woman who's offered you that connection, keep them in the loop, keep them up to date with how that connection is going, and really nurture that strategic connection with that person. And that's part of the reason that we encourage our portfolio companies to come back again and again at different stages of their corporate growth or different stages of that life cycle, and pitch again for another set of asks from Heads Over Heels, because it gives that portfolio company a chance to update the community. And that's what they really love. These senior businessmen and women, if you make it easy for them to be involved, they really want to be on that journey. They want to be helpful. They want to be kept updated and in the loop. And I think that's, if you realize that, and you sort of don't see it as hassling them and just seeing it as naturally sort of keeping them with you and aligned with you, I think that's a mind shift that makes it much easier to build out a strategic network that you can tap again and again and again.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think the main thing is that the ecosystem is so big now, and there's a lot of emphasis, and this will go to a question. There's a lot of emphasis at the early stage, and I think I'll ask a question to the panel in a second, and I'll give you a moment to think about it, which is, going back to the idea of the entrepreneurial identity, and when you decided to embark on the journey, did you have all your ducks in a row? I mean, this is something to the quality sometimes of the risk taking of women is that sometimes you need to have everything in order. And sometimes you don't. So I'll come back and ask that question in just a second. I just want to continue to comment on Ian and Nicola's contribution here. But the ecosystem is so big now, and it's almost about sorting through the noise to know where to go and how to get help. and what stage that you're at. Do you feel, do you feel Australia has enough help, I guess, at the later stages? So there seems to be a significant amount of assistance at the earlier stages, but then, and this actually could be for Renice and Charlotte as well, when you've had to make those hard decisions, whether it be through the News Corp stake or the Goldman Sachs contribution, Charlotte, when you had to make those decisions, did you feel, where did you go for help? Did you go back to people that you referred to before, or did you seek new? And so that's probably a direct question to the two of you in terms of, there is such a huge ecosystem now, but then when you came down to really big decisions, where did you go and how did you engage?
I'm happy to kick that one off, Nicole. Specifically on your latter point around big decisions and, something like Goldman Sachs, it's years in the making of thinking through. It's a change in business model. It's quite a significant decision. And for me, that because it's over such a period of time, there's a lot of change happening at the same time. But to ultimately make that decision, for me, it's within a fairly close network. It wasn't something that I would go out broadly to a lot of people to talk through in detail. It was a very close discussions that I had with people that I trusted. And then I think to your other point, you were asking around ducks in a row or getting started and how and when. And I was really interested listening to Sarah talk, because as she was talking, I was just thinking and reflecting on my experiences and relating to what she was saying. And I think one of the points she was talking about, which was around, the aspirations, and maybe I sit a little bit more in the male camp of being someone who's always knew I would do this, or displayed those behaviours from a child of, challenging the authority, never following the right path, and all of those things from a child. It was always what I would do, but I followed a certain path of going down, getting an education, getting experience, especially in the world of finance where that domain experience is important. And then you're going, well, when am I going to actually do this thing I've been dreaming about since I was 3? I guess there isn't an ever a right time. As Renice is saying, there's always a juggling act going on, so your ducks are never lined up. So it's, again, being comfortable with, this isn't a right time. I've just moved to a country. I don't actually have anywhere to live. Sometimes that is the best time because everything's kind of on the line. There's almost like there's so much disruption. The best time to give it a go is when your ducks are all over the place and you're just going all in and giving it a go. But I'm sure Renice has got more to add to it.
I couldn't agree with that sentiment more. I think like where I went for help, like it was definitely a lot of the learnings and the lessons from a lot of the programs, particularly SBE when it came to the investment period and EY as well, that I think really got me through. But then I look at the networks through Heads Over Heels and all 3 programs really, and it was probably the confidence to know when the decision wasn't right as well. Like there were a few moments for Visual Domain where we could have gone down a very different path. It didn't quite feel right. And even just having those people to lean on, just that sort of sounding board of just to trust your instincts, trust your gut, don't go there, keep on that path, keep it going was really a big part of it.
I think that point that made there about trust your instinct, trust your gut is just you hear that so many times. And when people are pushed into doing other things, there can be huge regret that I should have gone with what I thought. I was backing myself in the past, and that I hear that constantly.
Yeah. That's a good way to open it up to questions, Jim, is that, no regrets. There's a lot of successes in having been courageous and taking that risk and identifying yourself early as an entrepreneur, and also understanding how to build that social capital through the networks and communities that you have done, and the 3 programs that have helped, and Innovation Bay. and advisors like yourself, Jim, all make that possible for everyone. And I think that's what we want to make sure that everyone on the phone today hears and takes away. I think what I might do now, we've had quite a comprehensive discussion, and Sarah's research was wonderful to kick that off. We've got a lot of work to do to continue to make the ecosystem inclusive and advance more women and support more women through the program. And I just think entrepreneurs in general, I want to see that position on the GDP contribution from tech-based and emerging businesses hit number one at some point. So we're certainly on the trajectory to do that. I'm just going to open up to see if the panel, if the participants have any questions. We haven't had a whole lot of them come through, and I'll just give a minute to see if there's anyone who wanted to ask a question. I think we've had one come through via Kim, probably direct to Kim, that says, what was the moment when you realized your business was an investor-ready business? I would imagine that would have to go to either Renice or Charlotte.
I think it was when I was ready. That's really silly, but I knew when I wasn't ready and we had the opportunity. But when I was, it was the right time, and it all kind of just, that's a really horrible, terrible answer, but it's also kind of the truth as well. Like there was a lot of moments where things weren't great, and it was grit and determination that just kept it going. That's probably the difference of us still being here, 13 years on versus not, when we had opportunity for investment, but it wasn't right. And maybe it comes back down to trusting those instincts, but I wasn't ready for it. It was still focused on the task at hand, that I wanted to get to that next stage before we were there. And I think, that kind of perseverance and taking the opportunities when they come, when they feel right, is so important.
That's great. And Charlotte, how about you?
We took our first investment around 6 months after launch, and I think I put fairly hard targets on myself to go within 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. If we haven't achieved a certain milestones, then that was it. This isn't going to succeed. So within 3 months, we had our first $1 million of funding, and you get a really good grip straight away. We're earning revenue that you think that there's an opportunity there. And I think it's trying to get to that fairly quickly. What I didn't want to do is spend years trying to work out, is there a market? Can we get customers? So I put fairly tight time frames on myself, and then we raised money fairly quickly after that.
Yeah, super. And then I think the last question that we've got is, how did doing more than one program make a difference? This is a question we get often because, when you think about how many programs there are out there, and we're talking, and Sarah speaks to a lot of our entrepreneurs, they say, well, why would I do, your program over another program? And we often see, particularly in Australia, and Nicola mentioned it with Heads Over Heels in Australia and in the US, because the programs support the woman, the entrepreneur, and their business. They come back multiple times. So not only is it just multiple programs through all of us, but also coming back multiple times to build a different business. And so I'll leave that with you all, and also Ian and Jim, if you want to chime in on what you've observed for those that do multiple programs.
The 3 programs have brought me such different things. It's the SBE program, I think, really challenged me, but in such the right ways that I didn't even know I needed, but I needed. So SBE, I think, made me better. Heads Over Heels was the support network that, like, I compare it to my bloody wedding day. Like, it just felt like you had this community all there to support you that I had never experienced before. And I guess that support just builds you up and makes you feel so confident and supported, and that you can, you know, take on that next challenge on the roller coaster that hits you. And then the EY program, like, my God, the people in that globally, for one, so that was a big one. Just the fact that, you know, you're not just looking in kind of Australia and within our borders. There's this whole world of people going through the same challenges, the same roller coaster, the same experiences. And they're just the people I want to be when I grow up. You know, they're running $200 million companies with thousands of employees. You know, it's just that aspiration of like, okay, like same challenges, way bigger businesses, let's do this. So each three have been really unique, I guess, in what they've given me personally, but each with such a supportive and ongoing kind of that evergreen, to Malia's point before, with all three of them, that's just been incredible. The start of the pandemic, SBE actually started doing some chats, and I truly believe they put me in the right mindset to be able to tackle it for my business at the time. Like, it was just invaluable. And there's been moments like that since doing the programs in 2017 that have just hit at the right time that have been invaluable.
Super.
I guess just to add a little bit to Renee, so yeah, echo everything that she says about the programs, and for me it's all about timing as well. Whilst we might do them in all slightly different places and orders, it's what's right for your business at the time. And as I said, it was very early for SBE, and what's critical again is the people that you meet. With the EY program I did, we went to China, and I was so inspired by the people that I went with. Actually, EY, I've got a lot to answer for, because the sliding doors moment is quite personal there, but I came back convinced to have a third child based on who I met there. I was so inspired by this New Zealand entrepreneur. She had 4 children. I said, is it actually possible to do this with 4 children? So I'm like, okay, let's go. So yeah, EY have been a big influence in my journey, but from a professional point of view, yeah, it's all about the timing and the different impacts that journey along the way.
I'll just jump in with a comment, not so much about the multiple things, but just about the time commitment for any of these things, because there is a time commitment. You know, with the summit group that Lauren mentioned, and quite a few of the other heads over heels people are in, you know, it's once a month you get together with your, you know, we call them clans, other groups call them forums. So it's kind of like your, you know, 7 to 10 people who are like your private board, and that takes 2 or 3 hours. And then every other month you're getting together physically and spending a whole day together. You know, so most people coming in, it's not that founders are not busy and they don't think, oh, I can just easily carve out a day. So that is the number one challenge that we get. And a response to that is, like, you can spend your time in meetings and, you know, as we call it, like sweeping the sand up and down the foyer. But if you want to move the big rocks, you kind of need to invest in yourself and spend the time that it's going to take to do that. And some people in our group are members of multiple organizations. So there's a couple that are both in Summit and YPO, for example. You know, and it's not that, you know, you're going to double your effect with that. It is a big time commitment, and there is a financial commitment too. But you definitely need to invest the time to get the value for yourself.
It's always interesting when people come on SBE who've been in other courses, and some people come in and just go, oh, I don't really know if I need this. And all of a sudden they finish SBE and they go, oh my God, I really did need that. And I think it's the same with the EY program, same with Head Over Heels, that they don't know what they're getting into. And I agree with you, it's an amazing time commitment, but it's also transformational when you see people in the beginning and people at the end, you know, what they've learned, how they are, confidence. And it's just this ongoing development. It's great to be a part of seeing people on that journey. And then, as Renee says, they're coming back and saying, oh, I need to come back into the group to find out some helpful information, whichever group they come back into. And I think that's, the more we can let people know that when they're ready, there are these amazing programs available for them. But they got to be careful, because it's a lot of work. And it's really going to put them through, you know, the ringer, but they'll come out in the end just like so much better.
Absolutely. So I think that's the end of our questions, and some amazing themes here around taking risk, community, investing time. One of the themes that came out last week is having your, when you have taking the risk on a very big strategy that's going to last for the long term. And somebody said that last week. And I just wanted to call out that theme off the back of what was just said, moving the big rocks, having that big strategy, using the networks to drive that big strategy and investing the time has the payoff. So I think when Renice, you said, those are the people I want to be when I grow up. I think on the phone here today, you are the people that others will want to be one day. And so I think it shows the investment of time and what you've done around, both of you and Lauren and the support network, having the courage and taking those big risks and sharing it with everyone else. So I'd like to thank everyone personally for participating in the discussion, for Sarah for her great research and for sharing that with us to tip off this conversation, for the partners Heads Over Heels and EY, for your ongoing support and the collaboration that we have between, among all three organizations to help, women lead really big businesses, for Renice, Charlotte, and Lauren, for your contribution and your experiences so that others can follow your journey, and the leadership that you've set in who you are as entrepreneurs and as you are as founders and of amazing businesses. I'm sure, you'll go on to do more. Ian, representing the community, thank you very much for connecting us and constantly connecting, and that passion that you have for driving the innovation ecosystem in Australia. I mean, I've known you since we met at Jobs for New South Wales and have a massive, role in the ecosystem. And of course, Jim, our board member, who I get to learn more and more about your expertise and learn from you and how you mentor and advise in a very humble and way with a great sense of humor. So impactful, humble, and fun. So I thank all of you for being here. Hopefully everyone on the phone today has enjoyed it as much as we have, and we look forward to the next time. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Good work.
Thanks, Guy.
See y'all.
Thank you.
See everyone.